This moment found you not by accident, but because your carefully constructed functionality is finally fraying at the edges. You stand on the precipice of emotional collapse, yet the world sees only productivity, a well-oiled machine running on fumes. This isn't a breakdown, it's a revelation, a whisper from the forgotten corners of your own psyche. Deep within, there exists an archetype, a shadow figure Jung called the inner traitor. This isn't a villain in a story, but a fundamental part of the self, one that colludes with fear to keep you from the painful truth of confrontation. It whispers sweet nothings of safety, urging you to remain small, to avoid the messy, unpredictable landscape of authentic feeling. Through the echoes of forgotten myths, we can begin to see how this unconscious loyalty to childhood survival patterns has shaped your present. It's a lineage of self-betrayal passed down through generations, etched into your very being. You wear false identities like ill-fitting costumes, relationships built on the foundation of self-erasure, and a life that hums with the low thrum of quiet resentment. This descent isn't about healing in the conventional sense, but about rupturing the trance. It's about reclaiming the authority you've unknowingly outsourced to your own fear, an authority that has been waiting patiently for you to turn your gaze inward, not to fix, but to fundamentally change. This inner treason, this quiet agreement to overlook your own truth, leaves a cavernous void. We begin our deconstruction here, at the edge of this exile, by examining the subtle voice that witnesses your own departure from yourself. It's a voice that observes your compromises, your retreats, your careful steps away from what you truly feel or know, a silent observer in the theater of your own self-betrayal. The approval you crave, the quick word of validation, is merely a sophisticated mask for a primal childhood void. But what happens when that mask begins to crack under the relentless pressure of your unacknowledged needs? In the next section, we will explore the profound wreckage of identity collapse, specifically through the unnerving lens of abandonment, and how the fear of being left drives so much of this inner conflict. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos just like this. Now let's keep going. There's a strange, spectral presence that accompanies you when you decide to turn away from what you know to be true. It's not an external entity, but an internal witness, a phantom of your own awareness that watches as you gradually, almost imperceptibly, exit yourself. This isn't an active rebellion, but a passive surrender. It's watching yourself agree to things you shouldn't, saying yes when your spirit screams no, and then your inner witness just watches. It observes the erosion of your boundaries, the slow dimming of your inner light, as you negotiate with a world that demands a version of you that isn't whole. This voice doesn't judge or chastise. It simply observes, an archivist of your own disassociation. It's the part of you that notes the subtle flinch when you compromise your values, the tiny sigh you hold back when your truth is deemed inconvenient. It's the silent scribe recording every instance of self-neglect. It's a profound loneliness, this feeling of being watched by yourself as you abandon yourself. You create a distance between your core self and the persona you present, and this internal observer chronicles the growing chasm. This complicity, this inner detachment from your own actions, is the first stonework of a life lived in exile from yourself. It is the quiet acknowledgement that something vital is being sacrificed, and the observer presence ensures that this sacrifice is never truly forgotten, even if it is never acknowledged. This silent witnessing of your own departure prepares you for further acts of self-betrayal, a slow descent into a landscape where your own inner compass begins to spin wildly, and you find yourself adrift on a sea of unexpressed truths. What is this internal sentinel, and why does it remain a silent spectator to your own disintegration? In the next section, we will delve into the familiar sacrifice of self-truth, exploring the deeper patterns that compel us to betray our own deepest knowing. You know that quiet hum beneath your skin, the one that tells you something is off, something is wrong, but you push it down. It's a familiar song, isn't it? the melody of self-truth sacrificed on the altar of comfort, of perceived safety. This isn't a grand, dramatic renunciation. It's a series of tiny betrayals, each one seemingly insignificant on its own, but together forming a tapestry of inner dishonesty. It's the nod when you want to question, the smile when you feel a pang of hurt, the silence when your voice is desperately needed. This sacrifice is familiar because it's often learned, a survival mechanism imprinted from early experiences. To speak your truth might have meant isolation, punishment, or the loss of something vital. So, you learn to mute the inner voice, to prioritize external peace over internal integrity. And that internal voice, the one that whispers your truth, begins to feel like an antagonist, a troublemaker disrupting the fragile equilibrium. You start to fear its nudges, its insistent calls to authenticity, because they promise discomfort and potential rejection. But every time you silence it, you exhale a piece of yourself. You dim the light that makes you uniquely you. The archivist voice within continues its silent record, noting each instance of this quiet abdication. This familiar sacrifice builds a fortress of untruths around your heart, a comfortable but ultimately isolating structure. You become a stranger to your own deepest feelings, your own most resonant beliefs. The external systems you navigate, the social structures, the expectations of others, all seem to reinforce this pattern. They applaud your ability to smooth things over, to adapt, to never rock the boat. This is the gilded cage of conformity. This ongoing act of silencing your own knowing, this ingrained habit of self-betrayal, leaves a subtle but pervasive ache. It is a constant low-grade suffering, a symptom of an exiled truth. Having explored this pervasive act of silencing your inner knowing, we now turn our attention to the archetype that embodies this act at its most profound and unsettling, the inner Judas, the betrayal without a witness. There is a chilling stillness that settles when you betray yourself, an emptiness where a confession might have been. This isn't an act performed under a spotlight, but a private desecration, a tearing of the self that occurs in the deepest solitude of the psyche. This is the realm of the inner Judas. It's the part of you that recognizes the value of your truth, your integrity, your authentic self, and yet, for reasons cloaked in shadow, chooses to sever that connection. It's the internal handshake with the deceiver, a silent agreement to sell out something precious for something fleeting. Unlike a public betrayal, where witnesses might exist to call out the act, this is a betrayal that goes unseen. There is no external accuser, no societal judgment to fear. The entire tribunal, the accused, and the betrayer reside within the same lonely chambers of the soul. This isolation amplifies the pain. When you betray yourself without witness, the act solidifies more deeply, becoming a scar that is harder to locate, let alone heal. The absence of external validation for your own inner suffering makes it feel unreal, even to you. You might experience this as a deep, unnameable guilt, a sense of having done something wrong without being able to pinpoint the transgression. It's the feeling of being perpetually in debt to yourself, a debt you can never quite repay because you can't remember what you owe. This internal Judas figure doesn't wield a visible dagger. Its weapon is subtle, its methods insidious. It operates through omission, through the quiet acceptance of compromise, through the persistent denial of your own innate worth. The silence surrounding this internal betrayal is a tomb for your own authenticity. It's where your truest self is buried, not with ceremony, but with a chilling, unacknowledged finality. This creates a profound sense of disconnection, a feeling of being haunted by a phantom of what you could have been. This internal act of self-betrayal, so often unacknowledged, leaves a deep imprint on your life, shaping the relationships you form and the compromises you make. It points us toward the origins of this pattern, the foundational experiences that first taught us to betray ourselves. This deeply personal, yet universally felt, act of betrayal within the self beckons us to explore where these patterns are first laid down. In the next section, we will examine childhood as the initial mirror of emotional disappearance, charting the early landscapes of this internal exile. Childhood is often painted as a time of innocence, a sun-drenched meadow of discovery. But for many, it is also the first grand stage for emotional disappearance, a place where the delicate architecture of the self begins to be meticulously dismantled. This isn't about blame, but about recognition. It's about seeing how the survival strategies learned in youth become ingrained, how the suppression of authentic feeling becomes a learned behavior, a default setting. Imagine a child, sensitive and needing, whose genuine emotions are met with dismissal, correction, or even punishment. Not necessarily overt cruelty, but a subtle redirection, a message that certain feelings are inconvenient, inappropriate, or wrong. In response, the child learns to retract. They learn to build invisible walls around their inner world, to perform an emotional flatness that offers a semblance of safety. They learn that to be loved, or even just tolerated, they must disappear in plain sight. This disappearance isn't a conscious decision aimed at self-destruction. It's a sophisticated survival tactic. The child's psyche, brilliant in its adaptation, creates a dissociative state, a detachment from the overwhelming pain of unexpressed emotion. This creates an internal architecture where the true self becomes a ghost, haunting the edges of conscious awareness. The child's outer presentation becomes a carefully constructed facade, an attempt to meet perceived expectations, while the inner landscape falls into shadow. This pattern, once established, can persist into adulthood. The voice that watches you leave yourself, mentioned earlier, might have its roots here, observing from a young age as you learn to disconnect from your own core. The relationships you form, the way you navigate conflict, and your very sense of self are all deeply marked by these early experiences of emotional erasure. You may find yourself unconsciously recreating the conditions of your childhood, seeking out situations where you can once again practice the art of disappearing. This foundational experience of learning to mute your inner world leaves an indelible mark, shaping the very structures you build to navigate adult life. It points us toward the systems that reinforce this internal exile, the external frameworks that mimic our inner prisons. Having glimpsed the origins of emotional disappearance in childhood, we now turn to the external systems that reflect and reinforce this internal architecture. In the next section, we will explore the architecture of approval as a psychic prison. Look around and you'll see it everywhere. The subtle and not so subtle architecture of approval. It's built into the very foundations of our societies, the unspoken rules that dictate how we should be, what we should strive for, and what is deemed acceptable. This isn't just about social graces. It's a system designed to contain and control. It's the unseen architecture that guides our behavior, rewarding conformity and subtly punishing deviation. It teaches us that our worth is contingent on external validation, transforming our innate desire for connection into a cage of performance. Think of the endless pursuit of likes, followers, promotions, accolades. Each is a brick in the wall of this psychic prison, designed to keep us seeking external affirmation rather than internal peace. We meticulously curate our lives, presenting polished versions of ourselves, desperately hoping for the nod of approval from unseen judges. This system thrives on the emotional disappearance we've been discussing. It rewards those who blend in, who don't disrupt, who master the art of appearing pleasing. The more we dim our own light to fit into this pre-designed space, the more we are validated by the system. The irony is that this constant pursuit of external approval leads to a profound internal emptiness. We are so busy constructing the facade for others that we neglect the interior dwelling, the sacred space of our own being. The voice that watches you leave yourself becomes an internal alarm, a quiet report of the growing void within. Systems like bureaucracy, rigid educational structures, and corporate hierarchies often embody this architecture most starkly. They are designed with clear pathways, defined expectations, and hierarchical reward systems, all reinforcing the idea that value is conferred from above, not generated from within. This architecture doesn't just influence our actions, it shapes our very identity. We begin to believe that our worth is defined by what others think of us, outsourcing our self-esteem to the fickle tides of external opinion. We become prisoners in a palace of praise, terrified of the moment the applause stops. This pervasive system of external validation leaves us feeling trapped, constantly striving for something just out of reach. It's a gilded cage built on the foundation of our own perceived inadequacies, a prison that feels remarkably like freedom but offers no true release. Having examined the external systems that trap us, we must now confront the internal forces that uphold them. In the next section, we will explore the inner traitor's loyalty to familiar hell, understanding why we often cling to these structures of suffering. There's a peculiar comfort found in the familiar, even when that familiarity is tinged with suffering. This is the peculiar genius of the inner traitor, the part of us that clings to what is known, even if that known is a landscape of pain. It's a loyalty less to happiness and more to the predictable. This loyalty is deeply ingrained. The inner traitor recognizes the patterns that have shaped your existence, the familiar rhythms of disappointment, fear, and compromise. It views these as constants, reliable anchors in an unpredictable world. Why would a part of the psyche choose to stay in hell? Because hell, in its predictability, offers a perverse sense of security. It's a territory mapped and understood. The risks associated with venturing beyond are unknown, and the unknown, to this part of the self, represents a far greater threat than known suffering. Think of the relationships that repeatedly fall into the same destructive patterns, the jobs that drain your spirit in familiar ways, the internal dialogues that cycle through the same old anxieties. Your inner traitor champions these, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, misguided attempt to preserve your current state of being. This part of you sees disruption not as liberation, but as annihilation. It interprets the call for authenticity as a direct threat to its survival, even though that survival is a state of constant diminishment. It's a perverse guardianship, one that locks you in rather than letting you out. The systems of approval we've discussed become its allies. They offer the superficial rewards that keep us tethered to the familiar hell, reinforcing the illusion that this is the best we can achieve. To step outside means confronting the void, and your inner traitor is terrified of that void. This loyalty to the familiar is a profound form of self-sabotage masquerading as self-preservation. It's the echo of old wounds, a silent contract to remain bound by past pain, lest the present unravel entirely. It's the ultimate outsourcing of courage. The inner traitor's fierce protection of the known keeps you from the threshold of true change. It's a constant whisper of better the devil you know, silencing the siren song of possibility and growth. It traps you in a perpetual present, unable to move toward a different future. This loyalty to what is known, however painful, is deeply intertwined with our sense of self. When the familiar starts to crumble, it often leaves us exposed, vulnerable, and grappling with a deeply uncomfortable emotion. In the next section, we will explore shame as the shadow's vocabulary, understanding how this core emotion fuels our attachment to suffering. Shame is the language of the shadow self, the unspoken dialect of the parts of us we've been taught to hide. It's a primal emotion, a corrosive acid that eats away at our sense of worth, leaving us feeling fundamentally flawed. This isn't mere embarrassment, a fleeting discomfort. Shame is a deep conviction of being inherently bad, unworthy of love or belonging. It's the inner voice whispering, "You are wrong, you are not enough, you are a mistake." When we betray ourselves, when we compromise our truth, shame is often the immediate consequence. It's the shadow's way of announcing its displeasure, of reinforcing the inner traitor's belief that we are safer hidden and shamed than seen and authentic. This emotion becomes the vocabulary through which our shadow self communicates. It's not spoken in words, but felt in the gut, in the heat that rises to the cheeks, in the urge to shrink and disappear. It's a constant, low-level thrum of unworthiness that underpins much of our anxiety and self-doubt. The architecture of approval thrives on shame. It offers external validation as an antidote, a temporary reprieve from the suffocating grip of unworthiness. But this external salve only reinforces the belief that we are not inherently acceptable, that we need something outside of ourselves to feel good enough. The inner traitor, far from fearing shame, often weaponizes it. It uses shame as a tool to keep us loyal to familiar hell. "See," it whispers, "if you dared to be different, you would be truly shamed. It's better to stay here, where the shame is at least predictable." This emotional vocabulary of shame creates a powerful feedback loop. We feel shame about our perceived flaws, we act out in ways that perpetuate those flaws, or at least our perception of them, and then we feel more shame. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of unworthiness. The silence surrounding shame is profound. We often feel too ashamed to speak of our shame, thus perpetuating its power. It becomes a secret burden, carried alone, reinforcing the isolation that shame itself breeds. Understanding shame as the shadow's primary communication tool reveals how deeply rooted our self-betrayal can be. It's not just an occasional lapse, it's a learned language that dictates our inner experience. This often leads us to seek wisdom in the wrong places or from the wrong sources. This internal dialect of shame can mask deeper wisdom, leading us to mistake external pronouncements for inner truth. We begin to look for guidance from those who appear competent, but may themselves be blind navigators. In the next section, we will examine the saboteur in robes of wisdom, recognizing how even apparent sources of guidance can lead us astray. Sometimes the deepest sabotage doesn't come from an obvious enemy, but from figures cloaked in the authority of wisdom. These are the saboteurs who, perhaps unknowingly, reinforce our patterns of self-betrayal under the guise of helpful guidance. This isn't always about malicious intent. Often, these saboteurs are simply projections of our own internal patterns. They may be individuals who embody the very systems we are trapped in, or who genuinely believe in the efficacy of what is ultimately harmful. Think of therapists who, inadvertently, encourage a reliance on external validation rather than inner strength, or spiritual leaders who preach conformity disguised as enlightenment. They wear the robes of wisdom, their pronouncements carrying weight, but their guidance can lead us deeper into the trap. The inner traitor thrives on this. It seeks out these figures, finding validation for its chosen path of least resistance. The saboteur in robes of wisdom offers the perfect rationale for why staying put, why continuing the familiar sacrifice, is the only sensible course of action. Their wisdom might sound profound, their insights sharp, but if their counsel leads you further away from your own core truth, if it reinforces the architecture of approval or the paralysis of shame, then it is a form of sabotage. Their authority becomes the very thing that justifies your continued imprisonment. This can be incredibly disorienting. When our trusted sources of guidance lead us astray, it shakes our very foundation. It becomes difficult to discern genuine wisdom from subtle manipulation, especially when the manipulation aligns with our own internal patterns of self-doubt and fear. The illusion of external authority can be a potent drug. We surrender our critical thinking, our intuitive discernment, to those who present themselves as having all the answers. This act of outsourcing our intellect is another form of self-betrayal, another brick in the psychic prison. The danger here is that we don't recognize the sabotage for what it is. We interpret their pronouncements as divine truth, their advice as the path to salvation. We remain loyal to this perceived wisdom, even as it leads us further from ourselves. This subtle redirection, this guidance that masquerades as salvation but leads to further entrapment, has profound implications for our relationships. It's in our closest connections that these patterns of self-betrayal often become most evident and most painful. Having recognized how even seemingly wise sources can perpetuate our entrapment, we must now turn to the very fabric of our intimate connections. In the next section, we will explore false relationships built on self-erasure, understanding how these patterns manifest in our closest bonds. The architecture of approval and the lessons learned from the saboteur in robes of wisdom often find their most poignant expression in our relationships. We build connections not on genuine intimacy, but on the foundation of what we believe others want us to be, on the careful erasure of our true selves. These are false relationships, ghost liaisons where genuine vulnerability is replaced by performance and authentic connection is supplanted by a desperate bid for acceptance. You offer a curated version of yourself, meticulously edited to fit the perceived expectations of the other. This is where the inner traitor truly shines, orchestrating a complex dance of denial and compromise. It ensures that your partner, friend, or family member rarely encounters the full, unvarnished you. Instead, they interact with a carefully constructed persona, one that avoids conflict and seeks external validation. The sacrifice of self-truth becomes a daily currency. You suppress your needs, your desires, your very essence, in service of maintaining the illusion of harmony. You become so adept at this erasure that you start to forget what it is you're hiding and from whom. These relationships are inherently unstable, built on a foundation of untruth. They are akin to towers constructed on sand, always teetering on the brink of collapse, yet somehow always managing to stay upright through sheer force of will and further compromise. The pain of these relationships is a quiet, persistent ache. It's the longing for true recognition, for a love that sees and embraces all of you, even the messy, imperfect parts. But that longing is suppressed, buried under layers of performance and denial. You might find yourself attracting partners who mirror this dynamic, individuals who also engage in self-erasure or who are themselves masters of manipulation, feeding off the perceived compliance. The system reinforces itself. This constant performance is exhausting. It leaves you drained, hollow, and deeply lonely, even when surrounded by people. The voice that watches you leave yourself becomes an ever-present companion, observing the slow attrition of your soul. These relationships, built on the absence of authentic self, leave a void that cannot be filled by superficial affection or conditional approval. It's a hunger for genuine being, a yearning for a connection that honors rather than erases the self. The hollowness experienced in these false connections points to a deeper disconnection, a profound estrangement from our own physical being. We often neglect the very vessel that carries our experiences, our emotions, our truths. In the next section, we will explore the body as the archive of the forgotten no, recognizing how our physical selves hold the memories of our suppressed assertions. Your body remembers everything. Long before your mind learned to rationalize, to suppress, to perform, your physical self registered every slight, every unmet need, every suppressed assertion. It is the living archive of your forgotten no. When you are forced to swallow your truth, to agree when you want to resist, to accept when you want to reject, this refusal is not lost. It is stored. It lodges itself in the cells, in the muscles, in the very nervous system, creating a subtle but persistent tension. This is not about illness as a punishment, but about the body's honest reporting of your inner state. The chronic pain, the persistent fatigue, the inexplicable aches, these are the physical manifestations of long-held, unexpressed no's. They are the body's silent scream against the tyranny of agreement. The inner traitor doesn't want you to hear these bodily messages. It wants you to dismiss them, to rationalize them away, to treat them as mere inconveniences, separate from the deeper psychological drama. But the body is an undeniable witness. The false relationships built on self-erasure are particularly damaging because they deny the body its fundamental right to assert its own boundaries. Each time you force yourself into an uncomfortable position, each time you suppress a visceral reaction, you add another entry to the body's archive of suffering. This physical archiving creates a disconnect. You might feel alienated from your own body as if it's a separate, unruly entity, but it is an extension of your deepest self, a constant, undeniable testament to your lived experience. The architecture of approval extends to our physical selves as well. We are encouraged to maintain a certain appearance, to push through physical discomfort for the sake of productivity, further silencing the body's inherent wisdom. Recognizing the body as an archive means listening without judgment. It means understanding that the physical sensations are not random, but meaningful reports from the most ancient part of your being. This profound connection between the suppressed no and the physical body highlights a common defense mechanism, a conscious or unconscious detachment from lived reality. This leads us to the next section, where we explore dissociation as familiar ghosthood. Dissociation is the ultimate act of disappearing. It's the psyche's emergency egress, a way to survive overwhelming emotion or trauma by creating a chasm between oneself and reality, between oneself and one's own experience. It's not unlike becoming a ghost in your own life. You are present, yet absent. Your body moves, your words are spoken, but the conscious self feels detached, observing from a distance. This is the familiar ghosthood that arises when the no has been so consistently suppressed that the self begins to feel unreal. The body, as the archive of the forgotten no, becomes a vessel for this disembodied experience. It carries the weight of the unexpressed, the unresolved, while the conscious mind floats above it all, a spectral observer. Childhood experiences of emotional neglect or inconsistency are fertile ground for dissociation. When a child learns that their emotions are dangerous or unwelcome, they may develop the capacity to simply disengage. This protects them in the moment, but creates a lifelong pattern of detachment. The inner traitor finds this state incredibly useful. Dissociation offers a perfect escape from the discomfort of authentic feeling, from the fear of confrontation. It provides a powerful tool for maintaining the facade of functionality, even when the inner world is in turmoil. This ghosthood can manifest in various ways: feeling numb, disconnected from one's body, having gaps in memory, or experiencing a sense of unreality. It's the eerie sensation of watching your own life unfold from behind a thick veil. The relationships you form while in this state are inherently compromised. How can you forge a genuine connection when a significant part of you is essentially absent? It perpetuates the cycle of false relationships built on self-erasure, as you can only offer a phantom version of yourself. This state of being a ghost in your own life, while a survival mechanism, prevents you from fully inhabiting your existence. It keeps you on the threshold, forever looking in, never truly participating. This perpetual state of being on the edge often leads to a particular kind of existential dread. This profound internal division, this feeling of being perpetually detached, naturally leads us to confront the philosophical underpinnings of our suffering. In the next section, we will delve into Kierkegaard's despair and the mask of functionality, understanding how philosophical concepts illuminate our struggle. Søren Kierkegaard, the existentialist philosopher, spoke profoundly about despair, not as occasional sadness, but as a fundamental condition of being. He described it as the sickness unto death, a state of not wanting to be oneself, or a desperate wanting to be oneself, but failing. This resonates deeply with the mask of functionality we wear. The mask of functionality is precisely this despair. It's the desperate wanting to be oneself, the authentic self, but the fear and ingrained patterns prevent it. So we present a polished, functional exterior, a carefully constructed persona that hides the deeper malaise. Functionality, in this context, is not about efficacy or competence. It's about maintaining the appearance of being all right, of being in control, of being normal, all while denying the existential dread that gnaws at us. It's an active choice to suppress the radical freedom and terrifying responsibility of true selfhood. This despair manifests as a profound sense of alienation from oneself, from others, and from any notion of meaning or purpose. The inner traitor reinforces this, seeing the mask of functionality as the ultimate form of self-preservation, a shield against the terrifying openness of authentic existence. When you are dissociating or engaged in the familiar sacrifice of self-truth, you are essentially wearing Kierkegaard's mask of functionality. You are performing existence rather than truly living it. The voice that watches you leave yourself is the observer of this performance. This philosophical lens helps us understand that our modern anxieties are not new, but are echoing ancient human struggles with meaning, existence, and the burden of selfhood. The archivist voice within recognizes these patterns as timeless. The struggle against this despair, the yearning for authentic selfhood, is a central theme in existential thought. It's a battle fought on the inner planes, where the victory is not about external achievement, but about internal integrity. This constant striving to present a functional facade, to hide our internal despair, echoes through the existential landscape, reminding us of the eternal cycles of human struggle. This brings us to Nietzsche's concept of eternal return, which offers a powerful, albeit daunting, mirror to our betrayals. Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the eternal return poses a profound existential challenge. What if you had to live this exact life, with all its joys and its tortures, again and again, for eternity? How would you react to that thought? For those trapped in the mask of functionality, living a life of hidden despair and self-betrayal, the thought of eternal return is a terrifying prospect. It's a cosmic confirmation of their current state, a sentence to repeat their compromises and their silences forever. It becomes a mirror reflecting the ultimate consequence of their self-betrayal. The inner traitor recoils from this idea. It sees it as an unbearable punishment, a confirmation that their carefully constructed facade will lead to eternal suffering. It reinforces the desire to remain hidden, to avoid any choice that might lead to eternal regret. Conversely, for those striving for authenticity, the eternal return becomes a call to live their current life with such intensity and integrity that they would joyfully affirm every moment, even the painful ones. It's a test of one's affirmation of life. The architecture of approval and the pursuit of external validation appear utterly meaningless in the face of such eternal recurrence. What value does a compliment hold, or a promotion, if it must be relived ad infinitum while your true self remains unacknowledged? This thought experiment is not about punishment, but about affirmation. It forces a reckoning with the choices we make and the life we are building. It asks if we are living in such a way that we would welcome its perpetual continuation. The self-betrayal we engage in, the sacrifice of self-truth, becomes amplified when viewed through the lens of eternal return. It highlights the profound tragedy of living a life that one would not choose to relive. That is the ultimate manifestation of the forgotten no. This profound philosophical challenge forces us to confront not just our current actions, but the very essence of our being and the paths we are forging. It leads us to a critical juncture, a threshold where a final decision must be made. This contemplation of eternity and the choices that define it brings us to a point of profound stillness, a space where the echoes of our internal struggle can finally be heard. In the next section, we will explore the silence that screams at the threshold. There's a particular kind of silence that settles as you stand on the precipice of a life-altering decision, a threshold moment where a profound choice must be made. It's not an empty void, but a pregnant stillness, a silence that screams with unarticulated truths and suppressed possibilities. This is the silence that has been building throughout your journey, a culmination of all the forgotten no's, the discarded self-truths, and the performed functionalities. It is the vast expanse where all the unexpressed emotions gather, a deafening hum of what has been avoided. At this threshold, the inner traitor's grip begins to loosen, not because it surrenders, but because the weight of its accumulated betrayals has become too immense to sustain. The familiar hell offers no solace, only the grim prospect of its eternal repetition. The mask of functionality crumbles in this pregnant stillness. The ghost of your true self, long detached, begins to feel the gravity of this moment, the possibility of finally inhabiting your own life. The body, the archive of forgotten no's, surges with unexpressed energy and potential. This screaming silence is the space where the real work begins. It's where the deeply ingrained patterns are confronted, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet, unwavering commitment to finally hear yourself. It's the confrontation with the profound absence you've created within yourself. Nietzsche's eternal return can feel like an unbearable sentence in this silence, while Kierkegaard's despair looms large. But within this deafening stillness, there is also the potential for a sacred rupture, a moment where the trance of avoidance can finally be broken. This silence is not an ending, but a gateway. It's the pause before the leap, the quiet anticipation of a profound transformation. It's the moment when the accumulated weight of your history prepares to make way for authentic being, even if that authenticity involves a final, sacred act of betrayal, a betrayal of the old, false self. Having arrived at this profound threshold, this screaming silence that demands a reckoning, we now move toward the ultimate act of reclaiming ourselves. In the next section, we will explore the last gate, remembering the sacred betrayal. You stand at the final gate, not an exit, but a transformation. This is the moment of the sacred betrayal, not a betrayal of others, but a profound, necessary betrayal of the self that has been holding you captive for so long. It's the act of finally choosing your true being over the comfortable lie. This isn't about abandoning who you are, but about liberating the truer essence that has been buried under layers of fear and societal conditioning. It's the ultimate redirection of loyalty from the inner traitor to your own uncompromised spirit. This sacred betrayal is born from the ashes of the familiar hell, illuminated by the stark realization of Nietzsche's eternal return. It is a conscious decision to reject the mask of functionality and embrace the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of Kierkegaard's authentic self. It's the visceral experience of the body's archive finally being honored, the forgotten no echoing not as pain, but as a clarion call to embrace your boundaries and your truth. It's the ghosthood finally dissolving as you choose to inhabit your own life fully. This final act is not about finding external approval or shedding shame, but about recognizing that your inherent worth is not conditional. It is the courageous stepping through the screaming silence into a new reality of self-possession. Remembering this sacred betrayal means understanding that the parts of you that urged compromise, that colluded with fear, were never the real you. They were survival mechanisms, now obsolete. Betraying them is an act of fierce self-love. This is the culmination of the journey, not a resolution, but an unveiling. It is the dawning realization that the authority you outsourced to fear has always resided within you, waiting patiently for you to reclaim it. The gates have opened. Now that you have reached this profound turning point, shedding the old self to embrace the new, the journey of integration and honest living truly begins. Now that concludes this video. Make sure to subscribe for more videos and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We'll see you in the next one.